Thank you for listening to SPN, the Savage Podcasting Network.
You're listening to The Stephen Savage Show on the Savage Podcasting Network. And now here's your host, film and television director, Stephen Savage.
Thank you, Andrea. How you doing, everyone? Savage here with you for another episode of The Stephen Savage Show, the official podcast of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema and the Scotland International Festival of Cinema. And we're coming to you from the newly revamped and renamed Cranium Wheel Studios at Chateau Esteban in the beautiful alpine village of Idlewild, California. Just 2 hours east of Los Angeles, but a world away at nearly 6,000 feet high atop Mount San Jacinto. And just a reminder, look out for some very exciting guests coming up in the next few weeks, including, finally, a return to the podcast to my friend Oscar and Golden Globe nominated actress Anne Archer, and one of the stars of the new ABC series Alaska Daily, and of course the voice of Disney's Pocahontas, my friend Emmy-nominated actress Irene Bedard. She'll be here very shortly. And supermodel and actress Joanna Krupa will be here to talk about our brand new upcoming film project, Monkey Grip, which goes into production in 2023. So looking forward to all of those guests. But today, my guest is an actress, voiceover artist, multilinguist, and a world-renowned poet whose film and television work on both sides of the Atlantic has seen her career take some very interesting and memorable turns. And she's here to talk about all of that and more. Born in Paris, France, she's worked all over the world and been featured as an actor and voiceover artist in such blockbuster films as the list is long. World War Z with Brad Pitt, the Netflix series Elite, and her much talked about role as Fuffi in the blockbuster rom-com Chocolat with Juliette Binoche and Johnny Depp and Judy Dench, and just an amazing all-star cast. And I finally got a chance to watch the movie the other night and absolutely loved it, and loved my guest in it. So today she lives in Los Angeles, where she's calling in from now. So let me bring onto the podcast Miss Helen Cardona. Helen, how are you, my friend?
Hi, great. Thank you. You?
It's funny that Americans are they want to pronounce your name Helen or Helene or something like that. So if I get even close, I'll be happy. It occurred to me that you and I have gotten to be pretty good friends over the past couple of years, but we've never actually met in person yet. But we'll be changing that very soon, I'm sure. Do you remember how we came into contact in the first place? We've talked on the phone and we're always texting and messaging one another, but as of yet, we've not been in the same room, I don't think.
Not yet, but I'm looking forward to meeting you very soon. I think we've been in contact through social media first, and also I have a film that went to the Scotland International Festival of Cinema that you founded, right?
Right, yeah. The movie Chocolat, correct?
Yes, Chocolat, exactly, yes.
Yeah, I think that was probably the way that we got acquainted. But we also, it turns out, we have a lot of friends in Hollywood and in the industry, mutual friends. And that's always interesting to have friends that know people that you met, and then it occurs to you that you actually have greater connection than you thought you did. So it's interesting.
No, that's right. Yeah, we have so many mutual friends, and right. then and it happened at the festival, and then we got more involved.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So, long story short, we will we'll figure out a way to where we can grab some coffee together at last, and within the next couple of weeks or so.
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be great. The film, I'm just trying to really pin down for people exactly how these things come about, how someone like you and I can be working very closely with people we know and not meet. But I think the film festival connection, as we were talking about, is one way that we became friends, and that's not a bad way. But I want to start off the interview by allowing my listeners to know a little bit more about your life and experience, and being someone from a foreign country coming to Los Angeles to work. But you've worked all over the world, literally. I mean, you've just been You've been everywhere with your poetry and with your acting, and I just want to know, especially about your educational background. I mean, you've had you hold degrees and you've studied in different countries, and how the acting thing came into your life. So please enlighten us with your story in as condensed a manner as possible. So where you come from, your education, if you would, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's a bit unusual, even though every path is unique and different, and that's what is fascinating about everybody, that we all come to this world in many different ways. But I mean, I was born in Paris. My dad was from Spain and my mom from Greece. And I grew up in Paris, and we moved to Switzerland right away after I was born. And I lived there until I was 14 and back to Paris, except for 1 year in Monte Carlo. And then I went to live and study in England, and I went to school in Cambridge. And I also went to live and study in Germany and in Spain. So I studied all these languages. I'm a linguist. And I was a math major originally, but, sometimes when you're very ahead, then it's not always a good thing, because I got into med school at 17. And after 2 years, I had a breakdown, and I knew I wanted to be an actor, but I still went to college, and finally, I think on a personal path, for me to find myself, and really as a journey of individuation, and not do what's just expected from me. Even though I loved literature, I didn't want to just keep writing about other people's books. I wanted to live my own life as an artist, and so I moved to New York. And I trained as an actor there. I graduated from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, which is a 2-year conservatory. And I went to the Actors Studio, and so that's where I got started. And then I moved to Los Angeles. So I have, I did some theater with the English department of the Sorbonne and some plays, but I decided to fully commit to it and move to New York and start over. And then the literary aspect of my life came back to me, because I had been writing poetry since I was 10, and I had been, and finally I decided to get published, and I've published several collections of poetry with an Irish publisher, Salmon Poetry in Ireland, and translations as well of poetry with publishers in the United States. And basically wearing different hats, and
right.
Yeah. I also do dream work, because I started studying dreams when I was studying with Sandra Seacat in New York, whom I met at the studio, and she introduced me to that, and as a way to connect more deeply to a character. And then I kept doing that work, not just for acting, but for myself as well. And even teaching it, doing workshops, and even with literary groups, in terms of you can use dreams for anything you want, basically. Sure. All the answers are within, and you just have to dig and ask the questions, and so I love that. Yeah.
That's interesting. But you talk about medical school, and you talk about, I have another a French friend, and an actress, Natalie Boyer, and she's the same. She's an attorney. She's listed on all these lists of the highest IQ people in France. Yet she's more about her acting and her photography. Her big thing. It's she could have been a million things, but it's funny when the passion for acting just grabs somebody. There's no escaping it, and that's probably what you experience for sure.
For sure. I mean, I'm an artist by nature, and I think that's true. I just had an affinity for both, the arts and languages and mathematics. It's just that the world of medical school and medicine, the traditional way, did not appeal to me at all. Right. I just hated the attitude and everything about it. And interestingly enough, I revisited that in a much different way, in a different way to go about healing, through shamanism. I with shamans here, Native American shamans and South American shamans as well, about a more holistic way to approach medicine. so yeah, I think you can have a facility, let's say, for actually the part of the brain that where you find that applies to both languages and music and mathematics. That's the same part of the brain. And I met with Sidney Pollack, when he was preparing the movie The Interpreter. With
my favorite director, by the way.
He's wonderful.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
he had a mutual friend, and he found out because I worked as an interpreter as well when I was studying, and I worked. And so he picked my brains, and first on the phone, and then we met about how it was to work, for the UN and as an interpreter and all that. And then he based the Nicole Kidman character on my life by making her a linguist, a Sorbonne graduate, and a musician, a different instrument. Like I used to play the piano, and she had, I think, a wing instrument.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the same part of the brain, and you have to find a way to basically to find the life that suits you best. And I think when you're an artist, that's a calling that you can't deny.
Yeah. When's that? Robin Williams said that eventually you have to decide what you are and be that. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself absolutely crazy. Because you have...
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to be true to yourself, and it's not always easy because I've always been envious of kids whose families were extremely supportive in terms of you can do anything you want, And because academically I was doing so well, there was like this pressure, like my dad wanted me to be a doctor. And my grandfather, my mom's father, was a dermatologist, right, a renowned one. Mm-hmm. And I think my dad was a doctor at home. And so my middle name is Vanya, from Uncle Vanya.
Oh, right.
And I just found out that it just wasn't for me at all. I mean, I just can't tell you about how much I hated how they just went about everything. And so, so it just took me a while, as opposed to somebody who knows right away when they're a kid, that's what they want to do, and they go for it. I just wanted to do well, and I had all these different outlets that I excelled at. So it took me a while to, I had to experience something I didn't like to say, that's definitely not for me.
Yeah. Having too many options can sometimes be worse than having very few.
Yeah, it was detours, but I believe that in the end, everything serves you. I think that I have this very strong spiritual element, where I do believe that we have a path, and each of us has we have our own path, and we honor it, and I don't think we're alone, even though at times we feel like so, right?
Yeah. It's funny you talk about Native American shamanism and spirituality, and that hit me pretty hard when I was on a location scout for a movie in Montana, and I met the Big Day family, who are the chieftain, the bigger chief family on the Crow Nation, and just meeting the patriarch of the family, Haywood Big Day Sr., and just seeing all the sweat lodges, and just the sort of an everyday natural spirituality that lives within these families. They don't question the fact that the trees are speaking to us in their own way, and things like that. Where it's just
how there's one consciousness, right? That's for me. Yeah,
that's exactly the phrase. So, and I'm sure that interest and that natural curiosity for you about these different spiritualities worldwide, I'm sure that's one of the reasons why poetry has become such a big thing for you. When did you first discovered, first of all, that you had a talent for creating? And so, I mean, that's an ancient, and let's face it, an art that not all that many people excel in, for better or for worse, especially in this current strange world where anything longer than a text or a meme puts people to sleep, quite frankly. How'd you find yourself working as a known poet in the 21st century?
Well, that's something that's in me, just like the acting, and that needs to be expressed. So, like I said, I've been writing since I was 10, but I was just, keeping journals and had so many notes. And when I met my partner, John Fitzgerald, and who's also a poet, and I think we both supported each other in terms of, getting our poetry out there and finding a publisher and getting published. It was really nice to have that support system. And so I first, my very first publisher was here in Los Angeles, Red Hand Press, and they published my first collection. And actually, it was the publisher's idea that it be bilingual, because now I write in English. I mean, I speak 6 languages, and English was my 5th, but it became my language of choice, right? And so I write in English, but French is my first. And so what I did is I then translated it into French to present it as a bilingual collection. And so I did, and then I met this Irish publisher, and she published my second and third collections, Dreaming My Animal Selves and Life in Suspension. And they were extremely well received, I've been endorsed by a number of great poets and even, Olympia Dukakis and director Lawrence Kasdan and Costa Gavras. But great poets, like John Ashbery and wonderful poets, and it's been wonderful to be part of that world and to be able to share all that, because I look at it as also a form of healing. Basically, I say that I write to transcend, pain and transform it into beauty. Transmute all that into beauty. It's just very healing. So for me, it's really something that is just part of who I am, just as much as acting. Yeah.
Well, as far as we're going to talk a lot about acting coming up, but I was really curious, and I know a lot of my listeners are people who are trying to or have recently broken into the voice artist world, which is really kind of a tough nut to crack. And especially my actors in LA and New York and the UK, they'd love to hear how, aside from your on-screen acting gigs, you've made quite a career as a voiceover artist. With your voice has been featured in too many big blockbuster movies and television projects to name. I mean, your voice is all over the place, and most people they don't know it's you. They just know there's the voice of a PA announcer in an airport, and it's you. and you do it in so many languages. How did that all come about for you? Just that niche of your career, and congrats on making that happen. It must be a great way to keep working in between your acting roles, just to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I belong to the 3% of actors who earn a living from the craft of acting, right?
Right.
And I was in New York. I had just graduated from the American Academy, and I think it took me a year to get into SAG after graduating. But I had this actor friend, Francis Dumouriez, who's French, and he was the one who was already working in voiceovers, and he encouraged me to create my own, voiceover demo, and we did it in his apartment, just a homemade demo, and that got me my first job, which was a commercial for Calvin Klein, and so I was the voice for Kate Moss,
Right.
and so I did commercials. I started doing commercials with my voice, and industrials, and narrations, and books on tape, and dubbing, a lot of dubbing. And then I got into looping, which is really quite extraordinary. Is when you add all these what they call additional voices to movies,
Right.
and that's the voice of the caster, the voice of a radio announcer, weather person, the PA announcements at airports and train stations, like all kinds of voices, where you don't see necessarily the person speaking, and sometimes you have to read as well. But it's just a lot of fun, and I started working with French, and I'm perfectly trilingual with Spanish. My dad being a Spaniard, and me. Also studying Spanish as well, as English, and German. I'm fluent in German, Italian, and Greek. So I just started using all my languages, which is how I'm being hired. I can talk also with a British accent, and so that's also another possibility with English. But it's mostly with the languages, and it's a ton of fun. I mean, it's just it's intense work, because you have to get it done, in a session. But it's so much fun. It's freeing because you don't have to worry about hair and makeup and being, on camera.
Yeah.
But you act. It's acting. You act with your whole body.
Right.
Your movement. You're just embodying whatever the action is.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny.
But with image of the microphone. Yeah.
Now I'm like listening to every movie I watch on it. I just heard something a radio announcer on in a taxi radio was. Could that be her? You just never know. But like you said, you speak 6 languages and you've worked as a linguist and a translator. So all of that must come together and make. Just this weird, like you said, just looping alone. What a weird but fascinating sideline that you have. Who has that? Yeah, nobody.
It is. It is one of the many. Tools. It's like being an actor. You're an actor on camera. You're an actor with your voice. You just, there's video games. There's animation. There's so much you can do.
Mm-hmm.
For the more you can do, the better off you are.
Yeah. So,
of course, right? Yeah.
Back to your writing a bit, because that fascinates me also. As a writer, I always like to talk to writers. The poetry is one thing, but you're actually an author. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, have you written screenplays yet, or portions of screenplays?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I co-wrote a screenplay with my partner John on it's adapted from a novel that he wrote, and so yes, that's something we have to make happen.
Yeah, it's just you're not afraid to dive into anything. That's what I think is great. If something appeals to you or you just want to give it a try, you kind of just make it happen. And I think that's one of the things I admire about you. Is every time I read something about you on Wikipedia or your IMDb, I learn something new, and it's like, how does anyone have time for this? But you've won book awards, international awards. You've also translated some great works into other languages, including some works I've learned of my favorite Civil War era poet, Walt Whitman, which that's amazing. American Civil War history is a big thing with me, and his poetry is just amazing to know the things he wrote about while that war was going on. But how much time do you spend just being able to write? And again, how do you find time with the rest of your career to squeeze everything in? How do you delegate your own time? How disciplined are you?
That's a very interesting question, because basically it's a question of balance. And when I translated, so that was commissioned by the International Writing Program with the University of Iowa. Christopher Merrill runs it. And the war writings by Walt Whitman, they had never been translated into French.
Right.
And that was an endeavor that took months, I think 9 months, because there were so many texts. Like some were poems, some were letters, some were just prose writings. And what he wrote, what happened is Walt Whitman was sort of a nurse during the Civil War.
Right.
He was wounded, on both sides. On both sides, he was really, helping them. And what he did for them is he wrote letters to their family members to let them know what was going on with them. And so a big chunk of those writings are those letters. And also, Christopher Merrill wrote introductions to the text, and Ed Folsom wrote afterwards. And so I translated everything. And at times I would cry, because it was so moving. And people forget, how brutal wars are after enough time has passed, and the next generations, when people are young, they feel completely invincible, and they don't realize, what that get us into, to get into a war, right? They're just so brutal. So that to me was incredibly moving, and I was able to do it, I think, at a time where I had a bit less work, and able to I was very well organized, let's put it that way, when that happened, where I was able to have a schedule, when I would translate and when I would work on other projects. But yeah, it's really a question of balance, and at times one will take over the other. So if I get a lot of work acting, I'll write less, and I am at peace with that because I'm not a machine, and and I trust it, in a way that when it needs to come out, it will, even though I should make myself right daily, But I find that things are not linear, in a way, and things. For instance, my dad passed away fairly recently, and it was very traumatic, and I have been wanting to write about it, and I wrote a lot about my mother. Like my poetry collections are dedicated to her, but it took a while. Some people can write right away, when something like that happens, and with me, I need a little time.
Yeah, settling into the actual fact of your emotion is a lot of I kind of think it's suspect. I may be wrong, but when people, like somebody's parent will die and they'll be on Facebook right away, and I always go, what are you doing? I could never do that, and especially to sit down and create poetry, or create any sort of just writing about your emotions. I think taking the time to let it all settle in is a much better idea. But I don't want to get on a Whitman jag here, but but the fact that you did this work is just amazing to me. Now, you're translating words, but you also have to feel the emotion. You have to know that poet's emotion while writing, that you could go back and put your own sort of emotion into the words. It can't be just word for word. Here's the American or the English word. I'm going to use this French word. It's got to be much, much more to it than that.
Oh, absolutely. Right on. Really translating is about capturing the essence, right? And so you want to be as faithful as possible, but you have to capture the essence above else. And so sometimes, because a lot of times there won't be a proper equivalent, in language. And so, yes, you want, that's in a way, the way you're the most faithful is that way, as opposed to literally, you don't translate word for word.
Yeah, you just hit it on the head. You have to translate the emotion as well. And I'm just fascinated because Whitman, just such an iconic character, but he was such a personal, very sensitive man. You mentioned that he was a nurse during the war, and he had to give himself these little getaways. He would just leave because he couldn't handle the violence and everything but there was an officer who had watched him, and he would be writing a letter for a soldier who would be dead in 10 minutes more, and he would be able to keep his calm and be completely and help ease that patient into his death. And yet, as soon as it was over, he would just kind of have a breakdown, but then the next morning he'd be right back at it. And there are these, he wrote about the day Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and he and his mother were having coffee reading about it, and they had 4 or 5 different newspapers reading the different accounts. And he wrote about just that experience of experiencing the death of a president. And I every time I read it, it's like I'm sitting right there in his mother's kitchen. And that's so in order to translate someone's work who is as deep and as sensitive as that had to be, I'm guessing that it was an exciting project to work on.
It was extremely exciting and also very difficult, because some of the texts were very difficult to translate. So and I'm very grateful that I had this opportunity.
Sure.
I think, you grow in many different ways, and I think in general, the more you can enrich your life, the better it is. So, the more experiences you can have, you especially if you're going to be an actor, then you bring it all. So it's all there, when you have to be a character, basically, you have so much to, so many wells, to.
Yeah, it's just to talk to you about that. I could talk to you about that all night, just about translating emotion from other people's works. That's just, that is something that really excites me. But let's get back to acting, because that's what I really wanted you to come on and talk about your acting. And again, I had the first opportunity. It came back up on Netflix, the movie Chocolat, and I was finally, it's been out for quite a few years, but I was finally able to sit down and watch. I watched it mostly because I wanted to see your work, and just a brilliant little film. I mean, it's simple, but just the cast, how did they put that cast together? I mean, Johnny Depp and Judy Dench and Juliette Binoche and Lena Olin, who I've always loved, Alfred Molina, who's just an incredible, and you. That must have been one of the most exciting film projects you ever had a chance to work on. If you don't mind talking about just that, I'd love it.
Yes, it was. It was truly magical because it was a small movie when we did it. Like we nobody knew it was going to become so big. It was just a small movie, and there wasn't much of a budget for it. But it was truly magical on every level. I mean, it's from the top down, basically. So the director, Lasse Hallström, is just a joy to work with. He's the nicest person, and we were all treated the same, believe it or not. It's like, everybody was treated equally, and everybody got along, respected, we respected one another, worked so well together. There was such camaraderie, during the whole shoot. It was, I remember thinking about it, sitting in the chair before going on, set, and just thinking, I just have to remember that, it stayed, in my bones, because it was such a beautiful experience. And the location, we filmed in a French village called Flavigny in Burgundy, near Lyon. And then we filmed at Shepperton Studios in London. And we filmed in Bath, in England, which is a beautiful location.
Right.
The whole shoot was just, every department head was the best. They were all incredible with costumes and makeup and camera, sound. It was just, magical when something like that happens. You just remember it because it's just so beautiful in every aspect.
Well, what I really appreciate, the director was able to keep that small indie feel to the whole movie. But when you throw Johnny Depp and Judy Dench alone into a movie, you can lose that very fast. And even with those two actors, those iconic actors, the thing still had a personal, just a real personal, heartfelt feel to the whole thing. And I'm sure, like you said, you probably felt that from the very beginning.
Yeah, and Johnny Depp, the sweetest. I mean, he's the sweetest. He's totally like unassuming. Not at all like behaving like a movie star or anything at all like that. Just everybody at Judy Dench. I mean, Leslie Caron, who's an icon.
That's right.
With a small role. I mean, she's so great. And there was Carrie-Anne Moss, who had just done The Matrix.
Right. You keep, every time you open your mouth, you're naming another huge actor who was in this. It's hard to even keep track of who all was in that movie. And
it was really nice. But even, everybody, like the Irish actor, I'm blanking on his name now, who plays the priest, and the Spanish actor who plays my husband.
Right.
Like everybody was great. Everybody. It was just such a beautiful experience. I mean, you dream of something like that. But I'm telling you, it starts with the director.
Sure.
Because he just it's always from the top down, right? And the writer, who wrote Chocolat, Joanne Harris, and the screenwriter, they were there. I mean, the screenwriter was there. Everybody was just so. I mean, I can't speak highly enough of what a magical experience. And all the actors. I mean, Juliette Binoche, who was the lead, who was just there on equal level with all of us. Lena Olin, who's just a joy to be around. Everyone. It was just so beautiful.
As I'm thinking about, John Wood was in that movie. He's just incredible. Peter Stormare was in that movie.
Yes. So Peter Stormare I knew because Peter Stormare and I had worked together at the Actors Studio.
Oh,
it was the funniest. Yes, and so it was just beautiful to then be part of Chocolat together after that. I'm just telling you, it was just there was nothing that there was not one thing that did not go well, and it was just sheer magic. It was just one of the best experiences ever in my life.
Right.
I have the best memories, and
It's actors like that who everyone knows their face, like like Peter. He can play bad guys. He's a pretty bad guy, but he's not one-dimensional in Chocolat. He's a very much a two-dimensional character. Yeah, he's not a good guy, and in the end, he turns out to be the worst guy. But he gives actors like that give humanity to even the worst character. You always think of him as putting I forget the actor. Anyway, shoving somebody into a wood chipper in Fargo. It's like,
that's right. No, but I mean, he comes from the theater, and actually, I had seen him doing theater in New York when I lived in New York. He did a play. He did Hamlet, and I mean, when you're trained, like I'm trained in the theater as well. It's like you have all that experience because you have to work. It's teamwork, right? You have to work with actors. It's you have to rehearse together. So you get a very solid base, and you bring that to work,
right.
and yeah.
Well, anyway, I didn't mean to spend that much time on Chocolat, but it's just like because
but it's like that year was just incredible because and the year before, these were two magical years in a row. The year before Chocolat, I had filmed with Lawrence Kasdan a small movie again called Mumford, which is also an ensemble cast. Unfortunately, it didn't do well commercially, but it's just a lovely, lovely movie. A fantastic ensemble cast as well. And same thing, Lawrence Kasdan is the best director you can work with as well. Writer, director. I mean, he's known for the Star Wars and and all the big movies that he's done, but the Big Chill, those iconic movies. But that was a small movie that was just a labor of work, and beautiful, beautiful cast. Martin Short, and I mean, just an amazing cast, and such a treat to work with him as well. Like everybody the same. Everybody on that set was the most
directors who can go from these super blockbuster movies into these smaller films. To me, it's just I watch in between. People forget that Coppola did both Godfathers and Apocalypse Now, and he does these huge movies, and then people forget that he did The Rainmaker, that little movie about that little courtroom drama that was just so perfect. And
I know. Because I mean, Larry Kasdan, he does. He did those iconic movies like Grand Canyon and Silverado and Buddy Heat, but then there's Indiana Jones and Star Wars and Wyatt Earp. I mean, he's just incredible. And so I thought, once you've tasted that, once you've experienced that, you just know how the great ones work.
Right? Yeah. It's people get when I say that Lawrence Kasdan, I like his movie with Costner, Wyatt Earp, more than I like the Tombstone movie, that big giant. People get, how can you say that? Tombstone's the greatest Western ever. And no, it's not. Wyatt Earp is a much better telling of that story, and it's much smaller. And so it's just, people are funny, they think if it's a $300 million budget that it's instantly a better movie. And no, as a person who owns film festivals, I see a lot of small budget indie films, and I see magic all the time, and that brings, that was a nice segue into your film Keralik, which it won some big awards at the Scotland International Film Festival, and including an acting award for you, I believe. And you and I talked about the making of that film a bit and all the work you did in it off screen, overseeing the subtitle translations and generally pushing the film forward, wearing a lot of hats. And independent film is always an all hands on deck sort of game, but it seems you went that extra mile for Caroline, which says as much about you as it does the film, because you believed in that film and you believed in it from the very beginning. So when you're going from making bigger movies to little indies like that, does your outlook on filmmaking or acting change at all, or do you pretty much view it all as one animal?
Yeah, it's, for me, it's an opportunity. So when I was approached with a role of Arlette, who's one of the two, it was a beautiful script. I loved the story, a beautiful role. And so I said yes. And, Arlette, she's really the heart, the core of the soul of the movie. She's there from the beginning to almost the very end. You see her before her daughter is born, and then the first third of the movie, the daughter, Caroline, is played by a young actress, Callie Funston, who was 7 last year. And then the next 2/3 by Isabella Blake Thomas, who plays her when she's 17, and Arlette, the mother, she's the one, she's the one behind all of that. So she's, the way I saw her, because my mother had died, and so and my mother believed in me. She was, really the only one who believed in me. And Arlette believed in her daughter. She wants her to do well. She wants her to succeed. And so I really connected with that, and I loved the way the relationship between the mother and the daughter, this mother-daughter relationship. I thought it was really beautiful. And I was happy to do this movie, and then to support it, when you would go to festivals. I think that's just a normal thing to do.
Yeah, not everybody does it, though. You're very proactive with the movies that you do.
I think it's normal. I think it's and the more you work in the business, you find out that actually the bigger the movies, it's required. The producers expect you to do it, and it's frowned upon if you don't. So I thought it was a normal thing, a natural thing to support the movie. I'm proud of it and proud of my work. The character was originally written all in English, and I think it was the director's idea to have parts of it in French. So I translated some of the dialogue into French and worked, with Callie, who speaks French, to make that happen. And Isabella also speaks French, so there was like a lot of going back and forth between the French and the English. And then after the movie was finished, I was approached again about translating actually creating the English subtitles for the French dialogue,
right?
Which I did. So yeah, it ended being all of that.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, a lot. That's a lot of work. You just kind of fluff it off, but in fact, that's a lot of work just to do the subtitles on that film.
Yeah, it's because, subtitles, it's an art of its own. It's not just, you speak the language, you can do it. No. It needs to be done a certain way so it fits, and you need to know exactly what the person's saying and not mistranslate or things like that. So sometimes, when it's jargon or whatever, you have to be very comfortable and know what you're doing. So yeah, I kept getting involved after the movie was over with that to make sure it was done properly. And yeah, I'm very proud of the work I did. I think it's a very moving role, a very moving character, and I mean, she's really the emotional core of the movie.
Right, of course. Well, great job on it. That's all I can say. It's a really, really great flick. So what's coming up next for you? I know you have film projects and TV work always in the pipeline, but are you working on more poetry or any literature, or what's the main objective for you over the next couple of years?
Yeah, all of it. So I just finished On the literary front, I just finished translating a beautiful Franco-Syrian poet, Mara Malmasri. And so it's a book that's really the timing of it is I think it's a very important book because it's autobiographical, and it's called The Abduction, and it talks about the abduction of her child, by her then husband, who she had just they had moved to France, and he kidnapped the child to Syria. So it's a very moving poetry collection, and it's coming out next year with White Pine Press in the United States. So I have that happening. Final touches to the final details of the book. And then, I'm constantly doing voice work. So some of it I can tell you, some of it I sign NDAs until it comes out.
I'm playing that little game right now with another movie. It's funny. You can't talk about this. You're under some kind of magic spell. It's like, okay, whatever. But I understand that.
I think I can say I worked on it without revealing, I think, too many details of it. But if you go to my IMDb page, you can see some of the projects are listed there because of IMDb. But that's a lot of fun doing the voice, and then auditioning for on-camera roles. I don't
know if you and I talked about this, but I'm officially, as a director and producer, I am dropping all taped auditions, and I have an office set up in LA now, and all future projects, people are going to have to come in to read, and that's just my own preference. I'm tired of it. I'm just done.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think it's just wonderful to be able to come in person, and even with the voice work, a lot of it has been done remotely during the pandemic, but a lot of studios have been opening up, and I've been working, at Sony and at Fox and, other studios where they're bringing us in. So it's a mix between recording remotely and in person,
Right.
Yeah.
If it's big cattle call kind of things, I'll let the casting director take that, and they can watch all of the taped auditions. But when it comes to the leads and the big supporting roles, I'm going to have people come in because I want to get to know that person right away and feel not just how they're going to read the character, but how I'm going to be able to work with them. And I can't do that on a taped audition. So.
Oh yeah. In person is just wonderful because you see actually very well the essence of the actor.
Absolutely.
The feedback right away,
So before we let you go, I'd love you to tell our listeners how they can learn more about you and your ongoing work and what's going on in your career. You have a website, I know, and your big social media. Let everyone know how to keep up with you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, my website is my first name, last name, so it's Helen Cardona, HelenCardona.com. And then the Internet Movie Database is really a great, it's an amazing tool. I have everything there. I have 11 demos, in terms of like roles on camera or trailers from movies and voice, characters that I've done in movies that you can. So that's another place to go. And then Instagram, of course, it's Helen Cardona Magic. And Facebook, it's my name. I have a personal and a fan page under my name. So if you tap my name, they come up. I'm on Twitter. I'm less on Twitter, though, than on the others, but I'm there as well.
Well, good. Absolutely fantastic. I've been wanting to have you on for a bit now, and so I'm glad we finally been able to make it happen. So, all right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Stephen Savage Show. I want to thank everyone for spreading the word about the show, which has been vital to increasing our listenership on a daily basis on every platform. We're just growing and growing, and we at the Savage Podcasting Network truly appreciate it. So, for my guest, Helen Cardona, and myself, I want to say thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Helene.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It was such a treat, such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.